Thank you. Mr. Planet X, huh? Okay. That's interesting. Never been introduced quite like that before. Let me look at this. Is this thing working right? Does everyone hear me all right? Way back there? What? All right. Okay, I've written a book, Blindsided. Planet X passes in 2003, Earth changes. I'm going to pull out all the stops today and talk about things that I don't normally talk about, because I don't see any reason to hold back anymore. I wrote this book, by the way, in the box. And most people think that book is totally out of the box. But I'm telling you, I did my best to pull together as much information in a mosaic fashion so that you will clearly see that we absolutely have a 10th planet in our solar system, and that its inbound currently will pass, it's not going to hit us, will pass in springtime of 2003 and cause some mega calamities that everyone here should be aware of. And the reason I'm giving that knowledge out is not to cause alarm, but to inform, so that you all can make your choices as to what you're going to do or not do with that information. The last thing I want to do is to be accused of fear-mongering or causing panic. In fact, if you're in a position in 2003 where you know you're not going to make it and you see people around you in that state, my strong suggestion is to console them and try to send as much love to them as possible. And there I'm going to break away for a minute about Planet X, which I'm not going to get into right away. I want to talk about me, because there's a lot of disinformation being put out about me, and the reason being is because I talk about this subject, Planet X. So my motivation for being here is a humanitarian one. I at 19 years old, joined a solar corporation. I had a banner childhood. My father is a musician that used to produce records for Nancy Sinatra and Frank Sinatra. Boots are made for walking, is claim to fame. I had such a banner childhood you would not even imagine. I had the freedom to do anything. I had the freedom to think anything. I lived in a posh environment in a place called Toluca Lake, North Hollywood, which is like the Beverly Hills of the Valley in Los Angeles. Bob Hope had an entire block down the street that he owned. Andy Griffith lived next door. So what I'm saying is, I had the confidence because of that upbringing and not being told what to do, the freedom to do anything, to pretty much know inside my mind I could do anything. And in the beginning, at about 11 years old, when I really realized my position in this world, I thought, well, there's so many things I want to do. I thought the first thing I want to do, I guess, because there's so many things, is to make sure I'm around for all the things I want to do. I want to survive. So I quickly found out how to basically delay the aging process. That doesn't mean I had the discipline to apply it my entire life, but I'm a middle-aged 46-year-old grandfather. I just want to tell you that up front. That was my first focus. And I've done a pretty good job of delaying the aging process at this point and hope to do better in the future. Around the age of 19, I was offered a position as a gopher in a solar cell photovoltaic company. And the reason why I was excited about that, because the whole goal of this company was to help humanity. And that's what motivates me. I thought I could do 2 or 3 different things if I joined this solar cell corporation. I could possibly lift the economic, the entire world's economic system I could lift up. I could help wipe out pollution. I could raise the standard of living, is what I wanted to say, across the world. And so Even though I grew up with a silver spoon in my mouth, which is not the way I live today, I do not own a car, I do not own a place to stay at this point. I'm just living off of this book from month to month. And I support a small family up in Toronto, a 40-year-old woman that I recently met, her and her child. But that's just because I've never really had a great greed factor in my life, and I've been taken care of somewhat along the way. I joined this corporation, the solar corporation, like I said, to help humanity. That is my motivation. Along the way, I worked 8, 10, 12-hour days, 6, 7 days a week. I didn't have to do this. I did it because I wanted to. I wanted to make a change, and I didn't want to do it in a rebellious fashion. I wanted to use the system as is to make a change in this world. But along the way, I found out that there's a military-industrial complex that has attached itself to the backs of all the major countries of this world, and it basically pulls the strings. It owns the banks, it owns the oil companies, it owns the nuclear companies, and it stopped us in our tracks through some devious financial and legal means. They would not allow this corporation to go forward that I work for. I worked for 12 years on and off to try to get this inexpensive, low-cost, non-polluting solar cells out there to the world at large. Now, from my understanding now, that is all obsolete. They have got technology now that can create energy that's well beyond what we were working on back then. And then, along the way, because my mother, I got this from my mother, had all kinds of time. She was living a good life in Toluca Lake, North Hollywood. She looked into spiritual things, different kind of lifestyles, and introduced me to Edgar Cayce, introduced me to alternative lifestyles of way to eat, which is basically how you can keep yourself youthful. The less you eat, the higher the water content. Basically, that's it. I'm not going to say any more about that now. Later on, I will during my workshop. And so I developed an interest in prophecy, being introduced to Edgar Cayce. And over the next 10, 20 years, I read maybe 100 different prophets or intuitives or revelations out of the Bible. And the reason I was interested in them is because they all seem to overlap in some way. Earth changes were happening sometime in my lifetime. I didn't know why, I didn't know when. And then, along the way, working for the solar company, I lost that solar company along the way, and I also broke up with my wife. I had a son, and she got involved with somebody else, and she died. I fell in love with her probably more after she died, after we broke up, because we became good friends. And anyway, so the rug was pulled out of my life completely at a certain point, like many of you will experience shortly when this happens. I lost my wife, I lost my company, I was left with my 5-year-old kid when she died. And I raised him all on my own. I had a little help from my mother on weekends, but he's 22 years old today, and he's made me a grandfather. And my number one person in the world that I love is my son. My grandson. I love my son, but my grandson is my number one. I enjoy his company over any person in the world. I'd rather be with him, and I can't be with him all the time now because I'm doing this. The reason I'm telling you about this, I want you to know about me. I want you to know about my motivation, because since I've put out this information, my name has been trashed all over the internet. Like I'm some sort of Attila the Hun that is doing this to profiteer or scare people or something. This is nonsense. This is complete BS put out by the powers that be. And the powers that be are out there, and I love what they're doing. What? He just said he loved what they're doing. Well, they are countering me so much, and I could and I will maybe later on when I get a little more time give you the long list of things. This book, if you go into a bookstore today, a major bookstore, they will give you disinformation about this book. It's not available to December 2002. Check it out. Do it. I've done it with my local bookstore. Why? Well, you can figure out why. They don't want this information out there. But I like that they're doing that. They provide evidence, just like a master of kung fu or martial arts. If you have the mindset to use any energy that's putting directly at you, you can use it against them. And that's what I'm doing, okay? Any disinformation, any countering they use against me, I use against them. And I have the mindset and the spiritual connection to call on to help my angels, my spiritual guide, to help me with this effort. Just recently, an astronomer got on Art Bell to counter what I'm saying, all right? It developed more interest in the subject. Well, who is this? What is this Planet X? Who is this Mark Hazelwood that you're running through, you're trashing left and right? Well, I'm telling you, everything they're doing is having the opposite effect. It's waking people up to this subject because it is the most important subject out there. Very shortly, amateur astronomers will be able to cite this thing on a regular basis. There have been accounts of amateur astronomers as early as 2001, early 2001. Some coordinates were sent out all over Europe. One young woman in a French observatory in the Swiss Alps got a hold of these coordinates and found Planet X, and was very excitedly put out an announcement in French saying, you know, we don't know quite what it is yet. It's like a pulsar, and it has waves, infrared waves it's emitting, so we don't really know whether it's a brown dwarf or a pulsar. Now, I'm going to have a surprise for you very quickly here. I'm not going to talk very long. I got an hour. I got about 30 more minutes that I'm going to talk to you, and that is all. Because I have a surprise guest that I'm going to bring on during my hour and a half talk, so I'm only going to talk 45 minutes, and his name is Professor Physicist James McKinney. He brings this down to earth, grounded in science. He can tell you that NASA stands for never a straight answer, that these people are lying to you all the time. I mean, this guy, I may go out there and say whatever I want, but this guy will bring me down to earth. I'm telling you, he doesn't say 2003. He won't even say Planet X specifically. He'll say Planet X type objects. And usually, from what I understand, whenever this thing comes through, it brings with it, you know, a whole gang of people it parties with when it comes through. Every 3,600 to 3,700 years, I have ecological evidence in my book that will show that and prove that to anyone. In fact, I could have filled a whole book with that evidence. You know, usually I don't talk about these kind of things, but I'm going to let loose with a couple things right now that I've decided that I want to let loose with. This, I know Planet X exists. I know when it's going to pass, but I'm going to give you some speculation now. Speculation about me, which is going to seem far out to some people, but with a crowd like this, I wouldn't suspect it. My mother is very significant in my life. She dragged me over to a psychic conference one time in Orlando. And I would just to appease her, I went. I wasn't real all that interested. You know, I'm certainly very aware of my own intuitive abilities on occasion. I'm certainly aware, at about 10 or 11 years old, I pretty much figured out aliens existed. I mean, it'd be a big waste of space out there. I didn't need to go to a UFO conference to figure that out, or even look at all this crazy evidence that people are offering and counting. I didn't care about that. I mean, it just makes perfect sense to me. I look at things sometimes intuitively in my mind. I don't need some people to tell me things sometime. And a lot of times I can look at people and pretty much, if I want to, pretty much figure out what they're about and what they're thinking. I'm telling you right now that there are people in here that are from the powers that be, that are sitting right here in this audience, the New World Order, the people that are countering this thing, and I welcome them. They're doing their job. They got to do what they're going to do. And anything that they're doing, by the way, is backfiring on them. Well, I want to get back to the psychic conference. Excuse me for bouncing around a bit, but this is a couple pieces of information that I've never let out in a lecture. I wrote a poem called Endless Twilight Blue Dreams. I don't know, several years ago. And it didn't tie into Nibiru until I studied it lately. and got some other feedback from one of these super psychic children that I met that has grown up in his early 20s, about the age of my son. Indigo children you might be familiar with. He said, you know, at one point in your past you were an Anunnaki. And I said, how in the hell did you know that? Because I've always suspected that in my mind, and I cannot prove that to anyone, but it occurred to me at one point when I tell you about what I heard in that psychic conference, that I was at one point one of these controllers of the time. These Anunnaki would be the large humanoids that live on this planet that I don't think you should be concerned about or even worry about. It's the earth changes and this planet passing by. That's the focus of my book. I won't even mention them in my book. Won't mention aliens except for one point. There's one intuitive that gets their information from aliens in my book. That's all I'll mention them. But in this conference, I'm going to let you know. If, in fact, I was an Anunnaki, then I wanted to reduce my karma for what my people have done. Because the Anunnaki were here for, on Earth, 450,000 years, mining gold, using humans as slaves. And whenever their planet came by, for the most part, they wouldn't warn their humans what would happen when this planet came by, so they let them die. So if in fact I was Anunnaki, and I'll say if on that point, because I don't really know, I've got indicators that I may have been, then I agreed to be born several lifetimes to get used to being human and learn how to be a writer. And there's where I go back to the psychic conference. I went to a psychic. My mother paid $100, said, okay, go to the psychic. I said, okay, fine. And she started talking about things in my life, early on in my life, that no one could know. I thought, well, what's up with this? How do you get this information? Where's this coming from? I mean, you don't know this. I don't tell people this. So, you know, I thought, well, she's the real deal. And it's not like I haven't been, excuse me, it's not like I haven't been in front of someone before that couldn't read my mind. I was in front of this Yogi Bhajan one time that I grew up around, in and out of going to Kundalini Yoga. And for whatever reason, he read my mind for 10 minutes straight one time. So it's not that I didn't know that can't happen. So she said that all of us have angels or spiritual entities, whatever label you want to call them, that hang out with us permanently. And she said that my higher self or angel was simply conveying information in real time to her, and she was letting it out of her mouth. She didn't know. So I thought, okay, I understand that process. At one point she said, well, do you want to know about your past lives? Past lives? Okay. I said, fine. Well, in for a nickel, in for a dollar. All right. Tell me about my past lives. Well, she said, you've been in and around words for several lifetimes. The very last lifetime, she said, my name was Harry somebody, and I worked for the Stars and Stripes newspaper as a simple humanitarian writer. And she said that at one point at Normandy Beach, whenever all that was going on during the war, that I wanted to be there. I wanted to go there and really firsthand see what was going on there. And I got killed. And as far as I'm concerned, that is the perfection, me being killed there. If, in fact, that is true. I don't know this is true. I'll tell you what I know is true and what I highly suspect to be true. She said that also that I used to be a Bible-thumping preacher, which a very dogmatic one, which is kind of embarrassing to me today, if, in fact, I was one. She said I had a print shop in the early America, and I was very patriotic, and I exposed truth to people. And I was talking about the railroad and their corruption at the time. And they blew up my print shop, but they didn't hurt me at the time. She said also I was just a dweeby little small librarian in the great Library of Alexandria at one time. So if you put all that together with me possibly being an Anunnaki, this lifetime me writing this book was a kind of a setup, a spiritual setup. I kind of agreed to possibly be part of the human experience for several lifetimes and be in and around words so that at this lifetime I could maybe make up some karma real quick and get this information out about a planet possibly I used to live on, and that endless twilight blue dreams tied into that because it talked about a very serene place where it never got any lighter, it never got any darker. It was always endless twilight all the time. And if this brown dwarf is a slow, smoldering brown dwarf like I believe it is, it creates its own light. It's not very high light, and it's always the same all the time, except when it goes by this sun. Okay, but for the most part, around the clock, all the time, it has the same light. And I had like I said, a vision and a dream about that. I didn't, until I found out and learned about Nibiru, did I actually tie it together. All right, that's something I never brought up before in a conference. You take it for what you will. I don't know if it's true or not, but I got about 20 minutes here to talk about Planet X. Tell you a little bit of what I know about this this object. It is. First of all, before I even talk about Planet X, I want to set up the solar system so you can understand how Planet X orbits back and forth. We live in a binary solar system. Unbeknownst to most people, this is supposed to be classified military information, but it slips through the cracks sometime. I got this out of a 1987 Scientific American encyclopedia. It's a diagram I put in my book. Apparently the Pioneers 10 and 11 were not just used for what they announced they were used for. They were used because they were interested in triangulating and sighting our dead dark twin sun that lies out towards Orion and Planet X. And the reason this slipped through the cracks of the powers that be is they were simply talking about probes, the probes themselves, not Planet X. All right? So that sets the stage for, excuse me for all that, that sets the stage for Planet X orbit and why it's so long, 3,600 to 3,700 years. It orbits back and forth between two suns in our binary solar system, not one. When this planet comes through, you can expect what the sun is doing right now. In other words, the physicist will explain that the sun has an electromagnetic capacitor, a large capacitor all around it. Our sun does. And anytime any object breaks that capacitor, the coronal mass ejections start, the solar flares start. It starts barking like a dog that's, pinned up and someone going by. All right, that's direct actually from James McKinney. He'll explain it a lot better. The 11-year cycle, solar cycle, should have ended in 2000, and it's going on higher and stronger than ever. Now, from my understanding, that is because of approach of Planet X and possibly some of its accompanying objects. When this object goes by, you can expect this world to change. There is a long history. I have 35 names of Planet X in my book, mainly from ancient antiquity sources that name this planet specifically and give it different names and tell exactly what it does when it passes. The reason why our history is so disjointed and so short is because each time this planet passes, you can expect it to basically off the civilization that is currently on the planet. That doesn't mean that everyone dies, but the majority of the people will perish when Planet X passes. And the majority will drown because it sloshes over waters on the shorelines, and 90 to 95% of the population of this earth live within 50 to 100 miles of the shorelines. This is something that everyone needs to deal with in their heart the way they will, but don't go into a panic mode once this thing becomes very obvious, and very shortly it will. It is right now conveniently hidden for the most part behind the sun, but very shortly the majority amateur astronomers will be able to see this thing. There won't just be leaks coming out like I've gotten from so many different sources that are insiders within the military, within NASA, at observatories in Russia that know about this thing, have calculated when it'll pass and pass that information on to me. That will shortly be a thing of the past. Every amateur astronomer out there will shortly be talking about it. And then by the time that builds to a crescendo, at the last minute, NASA, of course, will announce it. And this society that we know of will basically be over. Now, that's a good thing as far as I'm concerned. The Achilles heel of this solar system is Planet X. It has changed every planet in this solar system just during its approach. There's been a 40 to 50% magnetic pole shift in the outer planets. Saturn has lost one of its rings. The luminosity values of all the planets have increased tremendously in the last few years. Between the mid-'70s and the mid-'90s, there's been a 400% to 500% increase in seismic activity. And over the last few decades, volcanism has also increased that much. In the last 7 years, I'm sure you know, the weather changes. You cannot avoid that. And they've been blaming it on global warming, which, excuse me, that's just bullshit, disinformation. I'll say it just like that.
Absolutely.
This civilization will change from my spiritual roots before I took a hard right turn and discovered all the ecological data and the misinformation being put out there, into hopefully a culture that's more in touch with planet Earth and views people first over profit. And that's the message I really want to leave you with. I'm going to give a workshop later on this evening and give you more detail. Only going to do half that workshop because I'm going to let the wandering vacationer who happened to show up here at the right time, Professor James McKinney, take half that workshop with his information, which should really ground you. Later on also, I will talk about how to deal with this information. Very shortly here, the economy of the world is going to collapse. The powers that be have a plan. They want to delay the collapse as long as possible. That is why they're countering this thing. Even though it's not working, the opposite effect is happening, which is a good thing. But that's their thinking. They need to delay the collapse of the economy of this world. They need to delay panic. And that's what I don't want anyone to participate in. No matter what other people react, how they react when this thing gets very obvious, because you'll be able to see this thing with your naked eyes probably 6-8 weeks prior to it coming. It'll come in and it'll look like a comet, and the professor will tell you why it'll act like a comet when it comes through. And there may be other objects that come in, other smaller objects, and other objects could actually impact this planet. In fact, I just spoke with, in the last couple months, a triple doctorate who got on the phone with me and said, "Mark, you've saved my life, 100% confirmed." This man is a homeopathic doctor down in Florida, along with a couple other doctorates that involved in very, very high-tech devices, etc. And he drew on his connections after he wrote my book to find out this without a shadow of a doubt if it was true or not. And sure enough, he attended a meeting outside of Boston, the Boston Science Museum, with 24 other people, he said, and some of them were government officials. And he said this meeting was totally hush-hush. Everybody there got to view Planet X on a computer screen via a Hubble link-up. And later on today, I will tell you all the different ways that I know of that the powers that be has confirmed sighting this thing. There is a long list. They've confirmed this thing 9 ways to Sunday. They don't know what the hell they're doing about it. They're digging massive underground cities, and so is Russia for over 20 years now. In fact, right after, by the way, the United States government announced having found Planet X, for your information, December 31st, 1983, the announcement was made. The chief scientist of the IR, Infrared Astronomical Satellite, announced to the 6 dailies at the time. It made the Washington Post. You can go read that. They can't carve that out of history. I mean, this is like George Orwell's book, 1984, the way this society works. It can't be improved. It's got to be offed, and it will. And this nemesis will come through and do its job, and we will have a different, better world. And the reason why I know that I am going to survive and how you can survive is of course, making physical plans, but understand that you are a spiritual being connected with. Everyone here is a God, a God that is totally connected with their spirits. And whether they realize it or not, they are using that on a daily basis to create their world. And you can create the mindset where you will absolutely know you're going to survive this thing. You just put that into your mind and know that your guides, as long as you create that mindset, it will happen for you. You will put yourself in the position. You will be wherever it takes to be a survivor. And I cannot tell you where a safe place to be. I can tell you a couple things. You don't want to be near the shorelines, absolutely number one, because that's what NASA speculates. Okay, they know without a shadow of a doubt that this planet is real, it's going to pass in 2003, but their speculation is 2/3 of the population will perish right after the hour of the shift. When this thing comes in, it creates it will create a magnetic electrical event that will actually turn the mantle into a sea of waves, tidal waves. And this will cause what is known as a pole shift. But the mantle will be going through tidal waves. Imagine that. So, you don't want to be in flat plains because there will be a large pollution event and much moisture, rainfall afterwards. You don't want to be in high mountains because there will be massive mountain buildings that will happen within an hour. You want to be in the rolling hills, and hopefully that will help you with the high winds at the time. There will be quite a few tornadoes that will be spawned, hurricanes that will spawn, hemicanes, those will be hurricanes on land. You know what? I'm going to turn it over to James McKinney right now. I think I've wet your tongue enough. If you want to attend my workshop along with James McKinney this evening, you can come later on if you like. But I want to introduce you to a man who's done his work in the scientific community. Now, I've gotten past information from sources that absolutely have the orbital elements of this thing, that have been watching it for years, that know its trajectory. But this man, he basically, for a number of decades, he has worked with the people that have been suppressing this information and knows how they think, is grounded in physics and science. He's a master of science. He's an ex-professor at Cornell University. I don't even really, I'm a terrible person even to introduce him because I can't even, off the top of my head, rattle off his scientific background. But he will answer those type of questions for you. I'll answer questions for you later on during the workshop, but I really don't have time right now. But later on, he will ground you in the scientific background that'll let you know how absolutely real this is. This is going to supersede every subject that you are interested in very shortly. It will become if it hasn't already, it'll become the topic of conversation in every household all over the world if my efforts come to fruition, because that's what I'm aiming towards. I want people to know. Now, what they do with it, how they react to it, I hope that they take this to heart and don't go into a panic mode, that they realize that this is a good thing that needs to happen to this earth. This society cannot be improved. It has to be changed. And God has provided a way to do this. By the way, before I bring him on, I will let you know that I've got, in the last week, in touch with a shaman, a very profound dowser, if you will. And he's of the mindset that people have a strong enough mind to actually change things. And he says that he's with a group of people that have changed the orbit of asteroids and deflected them with their minds. Now, he's also asked Spirit if this is possible with Planet X. And Spirit has given him information saying that it's absolutely yes, is the answer. And the next question would be, is it possible to do this? Are we allowed to even attempt to do this with Planet X? And the answer was no. This needs to happen. On a spiritual realm, this needs to happen. If there were aliens out there that had the technology to deflect this planet that is 4 to 5 times as big as Earth, 20 to 25 times its mass, they would not be allowed. This is part of our spiritual development. We are shortly going to go into a different realm, a different kind of being. Our genetics are changing as the megahertz of the planet has started to increase. It stayed at 7.8 megahertz for decades. The military used this for navigating the submarines. And now it's suddenly up to, I don't even know the last count. It may be up to 10, it may be up to 13, I don't know. But that's changing all of us. We are turning into a different species and a better species. And this planet is going to help us. So welcome it. And I want you to welcome Professor Physicist James McKinney, if you will. I'm so happy he came here. He was just driving through with his son on a vacation. I happened to get a hold of him with my cell phone and tell him, hey, can you come? And he showed up. Please give a warm welcome to James McKinney.
It's on? Is that, oh, here we go. What's the range on this? Can you hear me in back?
Yeah, you can pull it out.
Can I pull it out? Okay, that's a problem. I'm not sure. What do I have for time here, just for starters? 40 minutes?
Timer's up front. Timer's right there.
50? 50? Oh, okay, great. Wow, this is like a college lecture. Yeah, if you want to put that on me, that'd be handy. I won't feel like a rock star holding a microphone. Okay, there we go. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, great. This picture, we're going to use this, and this picture that made Mark look like he had a tie-dye T-shirt on during his talk here. But anyway, my name is Jim McCanney. Very happy to be here. I had talked with the people holding the meeting quite some time ago, and I was not certain about my own personal situation, but as Mark said, things turned out, and just happened to drive about 1,000 miles to get here yesterday, and so glad to be here. Planet X, and it's very, I don't know if you'd call it, it's a very strange situation being on the same stage with Mark. Mark and I are very different people. We talk about this topic in a very different manner, yet we converge in like two sets in a mathematical problem. And so it's very interesting to see how two extremely different people talk about the same topic on the same stage, and how his history and mine have kind of come together at this particular time. At any rate, just a little bit of background, and I'm not going to repeat things that are in my book, which you can find over at the table there. It's called Planet X, Comets, and Earth Changes. And but I do want to cover some of the basics here, like the cover picture. I'm going to show that on the screen here. That's why we got the computer set up here. Some of the files, and just give a little bit of a brief introduction to the science work that I've been involved in. And over the last basically 30 years. I've been through quite a bit with this, and there's been a very kind of dark period in this where this information was totally suppressed. Actually, during that time, it was being actively taught in Russia. Most of my papers, well, all of my published papers have been translated into Russian and are being taught as a top line of scientific space science information over there. The Russian scientists immediately identified, they were experimentalists, they were measuring things in outer space, things around the Earth, that they couldn't figure out what was happening, but they could see them and measure them. And they got a hold of my papers and they said, this explains everything we're seeing. And the rest is history. But what's amazing is the amount of effort that has gone on in this country to suppress this information and keep it from being brought forth. My papers were originally published in astrophysics journals. I was an introductory instructor at Cornell University, and I just happened to be there, kind of like I'm at this meeting. I went there with a girlfriend who was going to graduate schools in one of the other departments. And so I thought, you know, I was doing something else. I was not associated with the university at all, so I went over to the physics department, And I thought, I should finish getting my PhD here. I had a master's degree in physics. I'd been teaching for many years in college and university level, mathematics, physics, computer science. And so I went to the physics department. I said, could I apply to get my PhD here? And the chairman of the physics department said, well, no. They reviewed my credentials. He said, we really are very booked up here many years in advance. This is a very high-powered school, but you could teach here. So I actually ended up getting a teaching position. And so, like I say, it was kind of like ending up at this conference. And so I got the teaching position and started, doing normal thing there, and unknowingly started talking about the work I had been doing, theoretical work, which involved electrodynamics in the solar system, that comets could not possibly be dirty snowballs, and this was evident in my papers, and that they had to be a very electrodynamic plasma situation in the solar system, and there had to be a very large electric charge in the solar system. And at the time, I didn't know how it formed. Now I do know how it formed. And, but I could see this, and I was a theoretical physicist. I worked kind of in a room with a piece of paper and a pencil, and at the time, there was no application for what I was doing. I worked with celestial mechanics, which is the equations of motion and the understanding motion of celestial bodies based on gravity, Newtonian physics, Keplerian motion, that type of thing. And up to that point, no one had really, few people had tried to figure out how magnetic fields might affect things. But magnetic fields are very weak and they're very shielded. And there's all these problems involved with, including electrodynamics in the motion of the planets. So anyway, I was doing this and combining electric and magnetic fields with planetary motion, and I started to understand what fields look like when they combined. They become very complex shapes around objects. Little objects act different than big objects, and it's really complicated stuff. You're dealing with plasmas, which when a current flows, itself affects itself, so to speak, and currents can become narrower just because they're there, current sheets. They can pull and pinch together. So it's very complicated stuff. Very few plasma physicists existed even at the time, and even fewer had a real handle on how this stuff worked. So I'm in my back room doing this work on this. And also, at the same time, NASA had a repository of data at Cornell University, and this was long before they shut the doors on the acquisition of data by people like myself, so-called outsiders, independent scientists. At the time, they were weeding out the independent scientists, and one by one, these guys could not get data, they couldn't publish, they were basically squeezed out of the system, so the only scientists left would be the NASA inside scientists. So anyway, I come into Cornell totally kind of green at understanding this process, and I'm talking to the professors there about what I'm discovering, and the main thing I'm discovering is that comets could not possibly be dirty snowballs. If you look at the history of observation of comets, comet tail shapes, all of the other secondary effects that were known at that time, this is 1979. And I said, comets cannot possibly be dirty snowballs. And this is what they are, and I showed them the electrodynamic shapes that I would form with the equations I was working with. And I had papers written, and they were submitted for publication. My papers were being published in high-level astrophysics journals. And all of a sudden, one day, I was called into the same guy who hired me. He had my papers laid down on his desk, and he said, "What's this?" And I said, "It looks like you have my papers on your desk." And he said, at that point, he fired me. He told me I could no longer use Cornell University name, that I would have to finish my contract because they needed me to teach. But he had another woman there, her name was Dr. Richardson, and her job was to tail me at all times when I was on campus to make sure I would not talk to students. And I could not talk to the students about anything I was doing. So anyway, I finished that semester with Mrs. Dr. Robinson on my side at all times. And unbeknownst to them, I walked across campus and was rehired by the mathematics department. So, where I taught for another year and a half. And I continued publishing. And the professor, the chairman of the mathematics department, called me in the spring of the second year I was there. And he said, I got a problem here. He said, I'm being asked by the physics and astronomy and department to fire you. And he said, your teaching is very good. The students, you know, you have good recommendations. Everything is good. But they don't want you publishing these papers here. And I also found out that the editors of these journals who were publishing my articles were being ostracized for allowing these papers to be published. And so once again, very silently, I was slipped out the back door. And so anyway, the reason I'm including that here is because this was between 1979 and 81. And it's very clear now that these people were doing this out of ignorance. They thought they had the correct theories regarding how the solar system worked. What I didn't know was they had just gotten through about a 6 or 8 year hiatus trying to bury a guy whose name was Velikovsky, who said that Venus had come into the solar system, there were electrical discharges between the planets, and that this comet could become a planet. Well, oddly enough, one of the results of my theoretical work was to show how a very large comet, which now I knew was not a dirty snowball melting away. What a comet is, it's an electrical discharge phenomena with this electrically charged sun. The sun becomes electrically charged because it puts out an excess of protons in the solar wind. And at this point, why don't we cut the lights a little bit? And I want to talk about just the front lights if we could. There we go. There we go. That's good enough. Actually, there's some outer rings out here. They're very faint. In my book, they're a little clearer, but there's another ring out here. But this is a picture. It's actually called the Eskimo Nebula. It's one of the nebula. It's like a gaseous state that exists around a neighboring star. And in the very center, you see the star, the little dot in there. And now you have to understand that the actual star is just a pinpoint there, that there's a glow around that star due to gases and dust. So the actual star on this scale would be an actual pinpoint, and any planets would be very close around that pinpoint if there were planets around this star. The point is that this is a planetary nebula, and it's doing exactly what our star is doing. It has a solar wind, which is blowing out, and it has, you can see it has many layers and many aspects to it. And this is a spherical type of thing around the star. Sometimes they take the form of a donut. Many times they take the form of an actual donut because much more solar wind is coming out the top of the star than out the side. So the stuff flows back in and it takes on a donut shape. But at any rate, and I think our star is more like the donut type star. But the idea here is that you end up with a capacitor. Now a capacitor is kind of like a battery. It's a separation of charge. And I think most of us can understand this even on the basis of if you took a simple flashlight battery, took 2 pieces of aluminum foil like this, and you would run an electric lead out from each pole of the battery out to these pieces of aluminum foil, and you would form a capacitor, basically. And if you put an electron in there, it would flow towards the positive plate. If you put an ion or a proton in there, it would flow towards the other plate. And so you can get charge to move between this. Now, the trick here is that the star is putting out far more power in the form of electrical energy than it is in the form of light energy. And this is what I realized in 1979. And I realized that all of the plasma effects that I was seeing as the Voyager data came back from Jupiter and Saturn, and none of this stuff made sense, and the scientists were throwing data away, and they were suppressing data, and Jupiter and Saturn were both putting off proton winds, just like our sun was, but they didn't fit the solar model where The standard solar model says that the fusion is taking place deep in the solar core due to pressure. I said, that can't be right. Not a dirty snowball from some of the weather predictions that I had done. And he said, there's no doubt that NASA scientists today are in a state of total denial. Denial is a state when something serious happens to you, you deny it, you continue going on the way it was. It happens to some people with somebody close to them dies or whatever, or other situations, and this is the case with NASA today. Another group, so we have people through flares in the sun, and the sun explodes. It goes boom. The biggest flares we've ever seen. You don't have a flash here. We've got about 10 minutes left. So basically, what I'm saying here is that regarding a planet X, the biggest thing I tell people is action at a distance. We are already being affected by something that's moving in the solar system. The scientists that are working at these conferences right now, Johns Hopkins University, as we're standing here, they're getting together to try and understand this, and they're trying to understand it with scientific theories that are totally incorrect. They don't have a clue. And so what they're doing is they're hoping they can hold off this statement of something coming in and affecting us, and if it doesn't come near enough, they just don't have to worry about it. No, that's not true. We're already seeing the weather patterns of some object coming into the solar system, and I can see the sun reacting to it. The sun is barking. The year 2000, we were supposed to be at a solar maximum. And every 11 years, we have a solar cycle. So 5.5 years into that, we should be at a solar minimum, right? So the year 2002 and a half is where we are right now. We should be halfway to that minimum. The sun should be quiescing, should be very, very quiet. The sun is going bananas. It is at record levels. We are seeing the weather here as a result of it. And I don't have to tell you, you're seeing the weather. You can see it. We had an alignment with Venus and Earth this month, just a number of weeks ago. As Venus came around, watching on SOHO, here's Venus, here's the sun. Okay, here's the sun over in the wall. Here's Venus coming around, here's Earth. Just as Venus got aligned with Earth, bam, you could see the flare come out. It hit Earth, and that's what caused Hurricane Daniel, right off the Baja. And hours later, tropical storm, was it Alida? I forget the name of it, right behind it. Not supposed to happen. And it was a direct result of that flare. We are seeing the direct results of something coming into the solar system and affecting the sun right now. Now, I've produced what I call a 12-month scenario. And what's going to happen is the jet stream is going to start to go crazy. It's going to go way up, way down. So you're going to have a snowstorm one day, totally out of season. We had a 10-foot snowstorm in South Africa about a month ago. 10 feet in South Africa. That would be equivalent of Egypt in northern latitude. And it melted the next day. And what's going on is the jet stream is reacting electrically. Now, the theory of weather is that the sun comes down, heats the Earth, and that somehow comes up and causes the jet streams. That's totally backwards. The electric fields that are affecting us, you have to understand, we're protected by a very large magnetic field, so we normally don't see this stuff. What happens is during the periods of change, and is when this happens. When the magnetic fields and the electric fields are changing, that's when we're affected, okay? And it's very, like I say, it's complicated stuff. And if you are locked into an old mode of thinking, and you have your, grants and everything set up, this information is not going to come out. It's just not. And so a meeting like this is the only place you're going to hear this. But basically, we are seeing the effects of something big coming into the solar system, discharging the solar capacitor, and affecting the sun. And all of these flares are not hitting us. A big one came out the other day, went in another direction. Missed us. But as time goes on, we are going to see more and more erratic weather. We're seeing a weather pattern right now where the weather we were having monsoons coming up western Mexico. It comes up through part of New Mexico where they're being deluged, and 50 miles to the side, it's drought. Very narrow patterns coming all the way up. And then these things will blossom into a big storm up in the Midwest after they dumped all their water, supposedly. Where's all the water coming that's supposedly hitting the Midwest and going all the way out to the East Coast? Where's that water coming from? There's not enough water coming off the west side of Mexico, to feed those storms. You know, so what I'm saying is we are seeing the effects of this. What's that? Oh, okay, okay. Oh, okay. Which screen now? They have one? Oh, I see. And this is a, what is this now? Oh, just a flare.
It's just a flare so they can see it.
Yeah, this is a flare. I wonder if I can pick off, well, I tell you what, we're going to run out of time here no matter what. If you want to hear some more about this, I'm going to share the session with Mark, has been kind enough to let me talk with him tonight. I was apparently going to have my own session here, but I'll be sharing the session 7 to 10 tonight. We'll go through some more of this, and so you're invited to come to that. And let me just talk about the book for, what do we got, 5 minutes? Okay. Let me see if I can quick get up the picture here, the cover picture, which is, let's see. Okay. I hate these mouses, don't you? Oh, I know it. Let's look at Floyd here. I've got a lot of pictures on here. I think it's buzzing at me, so. Okay, here we go, Floyd. Let's hit the lights again here. And that light, please.
Somebody unplug that light on the left.
This is a telecast picture of the Atlantic Ocean when Floyd was forming. Floyd is the one right off of Florida. You see what this is? That's the eastern U.S., the Caribbean. Here's Africa, where the storms roll off. And these storms are rolling off here all the time. Why did, at this point, 4 of them form into hurricanes? 2 of them are forming that one dot in the middle, and the other, actually there's a 5th one that's forming a hurricane right coming off of Alaska, or Africa right here, off that tip of Alaska, Africa. Now, so we've got the object up there just above Floyd in the center kind of at the Atlantic is actually 2 hurricanes that have just combined. So we've got 4 full-blown hurricanes at one time. Why did this happen? It happened because we had Comet Lee come up behind us. We had a perfect alignment of Mercury, Venus, Earth. The Earth's moon had just moved through new moon. And what that does is it moves out of the way. And as the solar blast, which was hitting the moon previously, as that moon moves out of the way, it comes charging through and it hits Earth, and the Earth magnetic field had expanded and now it just gets smashed in. And it reacts very quickly, and the currents come across, the protons go one way, the electrons go the other way, you have a nice big battery, and it goes boom, and it discharges right down through the ionosphere down to the Earth's surface. And that's what happens. You could see the entire process happening. And this is what I call action at a distance. Comet Lee didn't hit us. I was on an internet page at the time. We were getting 3 million hits a month. Much of that traffic was coming from military, university, government think tanks. It was quite the list to see because we could trap the addresses as they were coming in. The list, the daily printout list of hits, the people hitting that page was about this thick. And of course, a lot of public. But at the time, Comet Lee was moving through, and NASA had a tremendous disinformation campaign claiming that I was claiming that Comet Lee would hit Earth and cause all kinds of catastrophe. They're caught and stuck on this thing where things have to hit Earth to cause damage. Absolutely not, and I never said Comet Lee would ever come any place close to Earth. I said it would alter its orbit just a little bit, and it might change the timing of this. The point was that when that alignment occurred, it's an electrical alignment, not a gravitational alignment. Those electric fields align, those current sheets that are already very long, extending out from the planets, when those things align, all of a sudden you have a straight shot down to the sun, and boom, the flare came out, it hit Earth, you could see the whole process happening. That's the result. Now, this Hurricane Floyd split, and it actually went up and it dumped what I call the equivalent of one Lake Superior volume of water on about 15 states, all the way up to Nova Scotia. And it went out to sea, and it was still a storm. The three biggest storms that formed into one cell, the movie was made The Perfect Storm. The three storms that formed were all hurricane-class storms. Not a single one of them formed over water. And it was in October of that year. Late October, right? All three storms formed over land. Where's, anyway, I could go on for a long time about this. There are many aspects to Planet X. I think the immediate Earth changes and Earth effects are the ones that are most, most people are interested. How is this going to affect me? So I just want to explain the title of my book is called Planet X, which I talk of in the generic sense. Comets. You now know why I put comets in there, because planets, we were all a comet at one point, and Earth changes. How is it going to affect you? And it's written for the general public. The two appendices, about the last third of the book, I actually reprint word for word, exactly as they came out of the journals, 5 papers that were published in 1979, so that you can read them right now and see what I was saying in 1979, and you're going to see right now that the scientists today are trying to grab for these topics.
Would you take some questions?
If we have time?
We have a couple questions. The questioners, please line up over there by the microphone so that the tapers can get it recorded. And then if you take a couple questions, I think we have a few minutes left.
Okay. Just get that cane with the hook on the end.
She's the one. She's the time lord.
Okay, you be the boss of time there.
Hello, James.
That's good.
Hi.
Hi.
Just wondering, since you're saying these flares bring moisture in, what about in regard to here we're continually getting moisture? Wouldn't the sea levels be rising? Where does this excess moisture coming in from the outside go?
Okay, let me talk about this. Good question. First of all, it's a reaction. It's a delayed reaction. As the flare comes by, we turn into kind of a mini comet. Well, what's a comet? Water. So the water's coming in and attaches in streamers into the atmosphere, into the low pressure cells, and it comes in. Much of that water is cycled. If you look at the hydrological cycle of the atmosphere, it very quickly moves the moisture to the poles, and it's dumping on the poles. We have, for example, World War II, right after World War II, a number of airplanes had to emergency land up on the Arctic ice shelf, and they went back to pick them up. I forget how much later, a number of years later, they were under 200 feet of ice. And so the ice is building up there continually.
Well, how does that jive with this stuff? Well, at least they're putting out that the polar levels are shrinking and actually melting now.
Well, that's happening too. In Antarctica, you have this tremendously thick 2-mile sheet of ice, and which is a very interesting point. 2 miles under the Antarctic ice sheet is an open water lake, Lake Vostok, which the Russians were there in the 50s trying to figure out what's going on. It's a dome in the ice structure, and it's open, fresh water. But what's happening is the actual continent of Antarctica is warm because of the last pole shift, and the ice sheet is literally sliding off like a glacier would. And so yes, it's true. And like any glacier, there's a flow, a very slow flow, and it's flowing off, and as those pieces are top heavy, they will break off like on the Ross ice shelf and then move back out to sea. So that is a very real event, and it's taking place very slowly, but also it's building up at the same time. But,
Well, it just does seem that we'd have more water increasing, but
well, you can. The point is, you can see these storms, and I see your point. And you have to understand, this is not going on all the time. It's in response to solar flares. The amount of water worldwide, the percentage increase in water is probably not that great. You know, and it flows off and it settles in to the ground, that type of thing. And then a lot of it is cycled up to the poles. And that hydrological cycle, you can see it. If this is the Earth, here's the equator, it's cycling up like this, and then deposited on the poles. Yeah.
I've enjoyed your talk. We've gone in and out of poles and so forth, but precious little's been said about absolute polarity. In your observations, have you any attachment to the east and the west magnetic poles?
My book goes into, there's a whole chapter on explaining pole shifts, and it talks about the rotational pole versus the magnetic poles, and the magnetic pole, or the magnetic field of the Earth, is very complicated. It has many layers. Most of the magnetic field of Earth, the part we measure with a compass, is in the ground, and it's very local. It's very local right under your feet in the mantle. Overall, we have a magnetic field that points north, and at the very center, there's a small magnetic field from an original core. But the majority of magnetic field from a space scientist aspect is in the form of electrical current sheets that are moving around the globe up high in the ionosphere. And so these things react to space conditions. So the magnetic field is very complicated. Magnetic fields tend to align, therefore the current magnetic fields, the ones caused by current sheets, are aligning with the smaller permanent magnetic fields that are in the Earth's core, which had to solidify when Earth cooled, as it cooled through the Curie temperature as a young planet. But it's very complicated. We could talk a long time on that.
I enjoyed your talk very much. Our scientists also claim to be able to control the weather, and we have a government project up in Alaska called HARP. I'm wondering, well, it's supposed to be able to change the course of the jet stream. I'm wondering, are they working in conjunction with what you're talking about, or can they counteract these weather patterns?
This came up on a radio show the other night, and I've talked about this topic quite a bit. Here's the situation with HARP, and I think it's greatly misunderstood. We have, energy systems have what we call triggers. Volcanoes, earthquakes, HARP is an example where the ionosphere has a tremendous amount of stored energy. And if you can find the trigger to release that energy or modify or move that energy, then all of a sudden you've gained a lot of power. Not because you can directly insert that much power into the ionosphere or into the atmosphere. Let's look at what Tesla was doing. What Tesla did, essentially, is he took a coil. He could direct a very high frequency, very high voltage, and he could a source, and he could direct that in a particular direction. And what he did is he directed it up. The Earth's atmosphere is a dielectric. And what he could do is he could get those dielectric poles of each little molecule, in the atmosphere going like this in a column, and he could actually break down a small narrow column that would reach up to the ionosphere, and as he did, the current would come down and he could tap into that, and he actually knew how to then break that down and put it onto the grid. That's what he was doing in 1900 when Westinghouse came and shut him down. So what I'm saying now, when Tesla wrote his contract with Westinghouse, when he sold off the generator equipment that he invented, Westinghouse bought it to produce the first electric grids in New Jersey. And Tesla wrote a contract and he said, I want, on occasion, I want all the power I can get off of your generators. I just want it for a short amount of time, and then you can have it back, and that's all I want. Well, what Tesla did is he went out and he built his own grid. And they said, okay, well, here's your power. What he did is he used that power for a very brief amount of time to break down the ionosphere, the path to the ionosphere, and drain in the current, put it on his grid, and once he had that path going, then he didn't need their power anymore because he had all the free power in the world. And so that's, you ask about HARP. HARP is very similar, although they're using, it's a radio network, basically, and it sets up a frequency, and they can manipulate the dielectric constant of the atmosphere, and they can bounce it around so they can touch an area over here. They can bounce it off the ionosphere and affect a certain area. We're out of time.
Just one more question. Based upon the uncertainties in the measurements of Planet X, how accurately can you know, or can it be predicted, at what time it will start causing significant damage on the Earth, what time the maximum damage would occur, and how far it would pass from the Earth?
If we get some solid observations, much of that would be somewhat predictable. But I just want to mention with Hale-Bopp, it changed its orbit daily, and this object would be no different, probably. So it would change very rapidly, and predictions are very difficult.
So at this time, you can't say with certainty that
Right.
this will cause a
Hale-Bopp,
cataclysm.
Hale-Bopp, for example, was much bigger than what they were talking about, the nucleus. It was a full month late in arriving at its closest point to the sun, a full month. So we don't know, but I mean, given some observations and some data, you could at least get within a ballpark.
So we can't say, based on your knowledge, can you say that this will approach in 2003?
No, I don't. I'm, like Mark said, and I don't make specific predictions. My role in this is to be the scientist that explains how things happen and the type of earth changes that you would expect. But once, like I say, we are looking, believe me. We have people who are very dedicated with very good equipment that know what they're doing, and they're out there looking daily. I get reports every day.
Where would you live?